95.5 KLOS and KLOS HD1, Los Angeles.
Gary Moore here with you, 955KLOS.com. And today we've got in here one of my all-time heroes of rock and roll. This is a guy, let me show you who we're talking about. This is a guy who in one way or another had something to do with this. He produced this and this and this with the anthem of every summer. This, a #1 album, and the greatest stage show ever. Oh yeah, and then speaking of great stage shows, he also produced this. And the follow-up to that. Oh, those guys with the painted faces. What was probably their greatest album? Yeah, he did that one too. Oh, and that band from England that built the wall, co-produced, wrote, played, I believe. Co-produced that one as well for the Floyd boys. The last studio Floyd album. Yep, him too. The old school rarities for all of us Alice Cooper fanatics, which is a must-own. Now what has he been up to? Deep Purple. Welcome, please, the one, the only, legendary, Mr. Bob Ezrin.
Thank you. Welcome. What an intro. That was pretty good. You missed a few things.
I know, I missed a lot of things. We could have been here for like 2 or 3 days just doing the resume. But welcome to the studios here of KLOS.
Thank you.
And you have been involved now with this Deep Purple record, which just came out, I think, May 13th.
Yes.
It is a mother, you know what, because Deep Purple is finally playing. How did you get involved with these guys?
The agent for the band, Neil Warnock, who is the guy who founded the agency group, was also Pink Floyd's agent for decades, and other people that I've worked with. So he's the guy who called me and said, I want you to do Deep Purple. I have a lozenge in my mouth. So I'm not clicking my teeth because I'm aged. So... so he asked me if I wanted to work with Deep Purple, and I was a little bit sensitive to being typed as the oldies guy. I don't really want to be an oldies guy, so I said no. I don't really think I ought to. And then he just worked on me, and he finally said, "Well, what if they come to Nashville, which is where I live,
right,
and record it there?" And I said, "Okay, I'm going to go see the band." And so they happen to be playing in Toronto, which is where I'm from. Right. We have a home there as well. And I saw them playing and there's this little segment they bury in their set of about 15 minutes of total prog jam, just let loose, great rock, symphonic, beautiful, virtuosic
like the good
rock.
old days.
Like the good old days. And I have to say, like, I was watching the audience through the rest of the show. They were into, their favorite songs and all that stuff. But when that stuff started to happen, they got up out of their seats. They were dancing in the aisles like flower children. It was just amazing. And I was thinking, watching this, it's like, nobody does this. Nobody.
Right.
And there's a good reason, because not many people are capable of doing it.
Exactly.
So when I met the band after the show, I said, I'll tell you what. If you guys want to make a modern rock album, I'm not your guy, because I don't think that that's relevant for you. Right. I don't think you can be modern rock. On the other hand, if you want to put the deep back in Deep Purple, and if you want to be that band that I saw on that jam, I'm in. I love it. So, and that was music to their ears. Everybody had been sort of beating them up, telling them, 3.5-minute songs, no, watch those solos, and they got to be hooky, contemporary choruses and stuff like that. And I just said, you know what, we're not going to worry about radio, no offense. But I said, there's only a few places in the world that'll actually play any of this stuff anyway. So let's just make the record you want to make.
Now, I don't know how when you listen to new CDs from bands that you really love a lot, what you go about in terms of read the lyrics as you're, or looking at the booklets when you're playing them. For me, I like to put the record on and just have it go in the background and just kind of like go about my business, read or whatever. But when I start picking up the cover of whatever it is and start looking at the tracks and going, what's the name of that one again? Which one is this? That's a good sign. And I did that time and time and time again with this one. Take it from somebody who has loved Deep Purple since they did Kentucky Woman. I grew up in Western Kentucky.
Right, of
so
course.
When you hear this loud version of Neil Diamond's song back about 1968, you go, who are these guys? So ever since then, I've always been aware and I've always loved this band. And especially through I think Fireball may be my all-time personal favorite, but, Made in Japan, the live album, Burn, the Perfect Strangers comeback records. I've loved this band for a long, long time. And so when I was a little skeptical when I heard this, and I I want to hear it again and again.
I have to say the other reason why I wanted to do it was because I had a shot at Live in Japan, and I had to turn it down for something. I can't even remember what the thing was I was doing, and because I was thinking to myself, it's a live album. Who's going to care about a live album? Just the all-time highest selling live album ever, except for Frampton, right?
Exactly. Well, you were kind of busy, I think, with the Alice Cooper Boys at some point, and that was a very busy time, which we'll get to here in a minute. But with the Deep Purple record, I think that this band is back in the hearts of a lot of us who really grew up with this band and liked them. I know Don Airey replaced John Lord, and they dedicate this album to keyboardist John Lord, who we lost. But Don's keyboard work, and he's been with the band since, I think 2002 or something like that. He's been with them for a long time. Steve Morse has been with Deep Purple longer than Ritchie Blackmore ever was. And they've crafted, I think, a bunch of great, not just songs. They're the tight 4-minute rock songs in here, but there's some nice 6, 7, 8-minute jams that you just let them play.
Yeah, I did. Well, there's one song in particular, which is Uncommon Man, and that intro to Uncommon Man is live off the floor. That was what I saw when I went to see them in Toronto. It was exactly that. What happens is Morse starts to play, and then Don reacts, and then Don does something which then Morse reacts to, and then the other guys jump in, and Ian and Roger start to push it in a different direction, and it's amazing how in tune they all are to each other, and how this thing just starts to take shape, this musical magic. It's like a gumbo, it just sort of comes together, and then it led into this song that they had written for John. It's about John.
Yeah, it's a beautiful tribute. There's some amazing music on this. There's also a song called Bodyline, which is the 5th track on here, which sounds like they're kind of jamming at the beginning of it and then go into this nice, and that trademark Deep Purple sound with the heavy bass and the organ together. Although I don't think did you put the organ through a Marshall amp like they used to in the old days?
Yes. It wasn't a Marshall, but yes, we had an amp.
Okay. Because that kind of like what somebody called it a Panzer tank.
Yeah,
on stage coming
more
over.
or less of it on various songs, but the other idea was to try to capture the energy of them live and try to make this as live a record as possible. They can play this record.
Yeah.
And they don't need to take any tracks on the road with them or any stuff like that. They can play this live. So if anybody's going to go see them now, they're going to hear this record just the way it sounds here. And so, we picked a studio in Nashville. We recorded in Nashville, as one does with Deep Purple. We picked a studio in Nashville with a big live room where the drums and all the band sat. But it also had 4 big ISO booths, so I could put the keyboard Leslie's and the big amp in one room. I could put the guitar amps in another room and the bass in another room and crank them. So basically, I had the whole stage set up, and when we were recording, everybody played. We were recording live, and then we went back and fixed a few things and overdubbed a couple of things, but mostly it was about rehearsing it until we knew our parts and we knew what it was that everyone had to play, and then getting into the studio and getting that great performance.
Speaking of the guys, we mentioned Steve Morse, the great guitarist, who many of you remember. I certainly remember when he was with the Dixie Dregs, and then later with Kansas. Don Airey, who has been this extraordinary keyboard player for decades upon decades. Worked with a guy named Gary Moore, the great guitarist, for a long time. Yes. Then you have Ian Pace on drums, and Roger Glover on bass, and Ian Gillan on vocals, who are part of that Mark II, that great Mark II Deep Purple lineup. And they just sound like...
Deep Purple.
Yeah. It's a Deep Purple. It sounds like a damn Deep Purple record, which is exactly what you wanted to do.
That's what I wanted to do. And more importantly than anything, at this stage of their career, I felt they deserved to make an album that they loved, right? They deserved it. And as you know, there's so much pressure now in the music business to conform and to fit a format, to make sure that you're ticking all the boxes that are necessary to sell something. That we've lost that thing where when we first started doing all this stuff, there were no rules, there were no boxes to tick, nobody knew where to go. So we just did whatever it was that motivated us, and we did what inspired us. That's what turned out those great records. We didn't know why we were doing Salisbury Hill with Peter Gabriel. I didn't know why I was doing that song. I just knew that it was really great.
Yeah.
And it worked really well. So to get this kind of invention back into our industry, I think we have to have these kinds of moments.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Speaking of going to see bands in concert, this guy, I believe as the story goes, went to see a group and they were singing a new song and it sounded like they were singing I'm Edgy. And it turns out that they were actually singing, and he never, did talk about some edgy things are about to happen for you. It turns out they were singing I'm 18. He took the Alice Cooper band in the studio, and the rest is history. I want to know, how did you take a band that was legendary for clearing out a room like the Cheetah or some other places around L.A.? And one of the reasons why Frank Zappa signed them to Straight Records, because of their ability to do that. The first two records, and I say this as an Alice Cooper fan, practically unlistenable. They just didn't have the songs. How did you take a band like that and within a couple of years make them into a band that was not only the best stage show, but they had a #1 album?
Well, I think that there were the elements were all there. They did actually have great song components. They just didn't know how to hang them all together. They weren't the greatest players in the world, but they were good enough for what they had to do. Alice had an amazing voice, and what a stage presence, right?
Yeah.
And they had all the elements. They just hadn't been able to pull it together in a cohesive way. And when I saw them for the first time at Max's Kansas City, September 8th, 1970. And that was a very important date in my life, because I was sent by Jack Richardson from Nimbus 9, the company I worked for. I was the coffee boy. I was sent by him to get rid of Alice Cooper. That was my job. So I went to New York and I saw them play at Max's Kansas City. I couldn't believe it. I thought the set was magical. I thought the theatrics were amazing. Everybody in the room had spider eyes and were all wearing spandex, and they had black fingernails and black lips. This was the beginning of the goth movement, right? And I'd never seen anything like it. So when I went, first of all, I said to the band, "We'll do it."
Right.
And then I went outside and said, "Oh, I am so fired. I am so fired." And then I got back to Toronto, and I said to Jack, I came in the door like the teenager that I was. "You don't understand. This wasn't rock and roll. There were no T-shirts. There were no jeans. There were sets and lights and props, and everybody had spiders and spandex. And I said, this isn't rock and roll. It's the beginning of a cultural movement." And Jack, Jack was sitting behind his desk going, "Enough already. If you like it so much, you do it." Which is how I got my start. And the first thing that we did was not "I'm Edgy," but "I'm 18," which was part of 4 songs that Warner Brothers would allow us to record. They were going like, "Who's he? Who's that?" And Jack goes, "He's with me. I got it. I'm doing the session. He's with me." And lucky for me, he allowed me to learn to be a producer on that.
So they go on to fame and fortune. They have this incredible stage show. Word of mouth comes out. They were on Don Kirshner's rock concert, $1 Billion Babies. Hits #1. About this time in 1973, it was the greatest rock show I've ever seen. It was the show that Gene Simmons took the guys in KISS to go and see. He said, "This is the standard by which we have to raise ourselves if we want to do a great stage show." And then by 1974, poof, they were gone. What happened? How does a band go from a #1 record like that and climb so high so quickly? And then everybody goes their separate ways. And then the following year after that, here's "Welcome to My Nightmare," and it's kind of starting all over again.
He's back.
Yeah.
Well, I think that people's judgments are sometimes clouded a great deal by success. And just ask Justin Bieber.
Right.
It really goes to your head, and you're a young person and you just don't know how to deal with it. And here they were thinking they were the biggest band in the world, and each one of them as individuals wanted to have their voice, and they wanted to be respected and understood as an integral part of Alice Cooper. Not just have this guy Alice go out all the time and do all the interviews and do all the press and get all the credit. So they wanted to do solo projects. And Shep said to them, "I wouldn't do that, because if you do them, he's going to do one, and who knows how that will turn out."
Right.
So, so they decided that they were going to, first of all, it started off with a little bit of a revolt in the band at Muscle of Love. They decided that they weren't going to listen to me anymore, so I gently bowed out and let the two Jacks, Jack Douglas and Jack Richardson, do it. Richardson was my mentor, and Douglas was my mentee. Was a guy that had worked for me. So I thought that was a good combination. They would do a good job, and I was tired anyway. So so they did one without me, and then they decided, well, we're really good, so we're gonna keep going, and they were really good, and they could have kept going, and I wish they'd kept going as a band on a certain level, but as somebody very smart said, everything works out the way it's supposed to, right?
Absolutely. Well, here's the other thing, too. I think that's very understated about what was going on in rock those days. I believe that most rock bands signed up for like 6 albums in 6 years, which
Yeah.
nowadays I don't think there's anything like that going on.
I think it's going to start to happen, though. You watch.
Really?
Yeah, because I think what we're doing is we're chewing up the stuff faster than people can put it out. And, it used to be that you would have a single and it would stay at radio for, months, and then there'd be another one and it would stay for months, and then you'd finally put the album out, and then you'd go on tour, and that would be the cycle, we would call it.
Yeah.
The album, either the touring cycle or the album cycle. And now it's like, put anything out, they eat it right away. It's like Netflix. When Netflix puts out a TV series, they put out all episodes
Right.
at once. And what they're learning, and what the old media are just starting to adapt to, is that that's what people want. They want to get it all now. I want it now. I don't want to wait for 6 months for the rest of your record. Screw you. Give me the stuff. I want it.
Right.
So, and then once they get it and they go through it, then they go, what else you got? And you need to have more. So, I would encourage, especially with young bands where the economics are not so oppressive that they're going to kill themselves if they don't stay on the road, go out for 6 months and then record again, and then go out and then record again, and keep recording. In fact, take a rig on the road. It's so easy to do now. And write, and record, because your audience, if they love you, are just going to keep coming back for more. They're going to say, now what?
Yeah, exactly.
They're going to say, now what?
Oh, this was great. What else do they have? When's the next one?
I'm encouraging them. I said, when do we start, guys? They're on the road right now, but I would encourage them to start writing immediately. Just keep doing it. At some point, people will stop buying it, and it'll be a losing proposition. But while people care and they're enjoying it, let's keep doing it.
Well, in the old days with Deep Purple, it was very easy for them to write songs. A lot of times Richie would just come up with a riff and they would just build something around it. Or I think that there was a great story about Highway Star, about how they were telling journalists they were on a bus and said, well, we just decided just to write a song about cars.
Right,
and
exactly.
about doing this sort of thing. So speaking of Nimbus 9, whenever I saw Nimbus 9 Productions on the albums, I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it was going to be pretty good because of all the other things that Nimbus 9 had done. You've got a school that's sort of used that name.
Well, the Nimbus School of Recording Arts in Vancouver, British Columbia, which, by the way, for any of you who are looking to get out of here, it's the most beautiful city in North America. It's like the best kept secret in the whole.
Everybody who goes there raves about it, so you would think it would be this overpopulated place now with everybody who's loved it.
Well, and there are certain, it is slightly expensive, but boy, is it gorgeous. Anyway, but we started off, Nimbus 9 Productions was Jack Richardson, really, and his partners. They had a level of excellence that they required of everything that they did and of all the people that work for them that made it a really tough but wonderful and exciting place to work. It was like a crucible. It was baptism by fire. And I was working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with Jack because that's what was required in order to learn enough to be able to keep up with him. He demanded excellence, and he demanded that you knew what he knew. So, and then, fast forward many decades, we're hiring people to work with us in the studios, and we're not getting that kind of guy. So Garth Richardson, Garth, who's a pretty good producer in his own right, and this Biffy Clyro album that he has out now is like huge in Europe, huge in the UK, and I think it's starting to happen over here. But, Garth is an amazing producer. He's Jack's son. He was my protege. I was Jack's protege. Garth was my protege. And one day I visited him in his studio in Vancouver, and he said, I can't get good help. These schools, they're turning out these kids. They suck. So I said, why don't we let's start one of our own, and let's do the Nimbus method. So we did. We started a school in Vancouver, and it's doing great. It's right downtown. We've got about 110 students going through there, and the cool thing about it is we bring our projects in there. So if you look at the label copy here, the students of the Nimbus School are on the Deep Purple.
Are they?
album.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. Now, and it's on the web. You can find out where you've got a website for them.
Yeah, it's www.nimbusrecording.com. Nimbus, N-I-M-B-U-S, like the cloud, right?
And people can come from all over the world and go.
We have kids. Yeah, we've got we had a kid from Egypt, and we've got some from the Far East, of course, because it's on the West Coast, and from all across Canada. Now some from Washington State. But I think I'd love to get more American kids up there. I think that would be great, and they would really enjoy it.
Why wouldn't you want to go and learn from, amongst other people, this guy who, first of all, Pink Floyd, The Wall, adjectives to describe your experience on Pink Floyd's The Wall?
Magical, challenging, illuminating, life-altering. How about that?
Would you do it again?
Oh, yeah, in a heartbeat. Are you kidding? What a great project. when they came, there were a lot of gotchas in this project. When they first came to me about working with the band, it was presented in a way that changed quite dramatically over the few months before we actually got started. And there were a number of times when I was going, do I really, really want to do this? But at the end of the day, of course I did. It was Pink Floyd. Dark Side of the Moon was like the soundtrack of my existence and my exploration at that time. That's what made me think sonically about a whole new way of doing stuff. So yeah, I wanted to work with Pink Floyd, and it turned out to be, it was tough, and we moved around a lot. There was a lot of conflict. I was just telling a friend of mine today, we were talking about another project where he was saying, I just want you to be conscious of these two people may not get along. And I said, dynamic tension makes for much better stuff. I tell, when I lecture my students, I say, if you're flying a kite and you let go of the string, what happens? And they all go, well, it flies away. No, it doesn't. It falls to earth. Mm-hmm. The only thing that keeps the kite flying is its desire to get away from you. When you hold it, when you hold that string, that makes the kite fly higher. So it's that dynamic tension, and there was a lot of it on the Making of the Wall, but it just kept making things better and better and better. I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of a lot of projects, but that is a seminal, important work, I think.
The difference between working on that record versus the next Pink Floyd records.
Well, Roger is Roger's a force of nature and a man to be reckoned with. So he takes up a lot of energy and brings an awful lot to the room. And so not having him there was, on the one hand, it made things slightly less fraught and less tense. But on the other hand, also we missed his genius and the spark and watching those sparks fly between him and David and me. So somewhere in heart of hearts, I always hoped that they would bury the hatchet and get back together, and that we could do stuff together. But when once Rick passed away, I think that opportunity, the possibility of that disappeared.
He was such a huge part of the band.
He was, and he was. People don't realize how much of the Floyd sound, particularly if you go back to Dark Side, and you listen to some of those, seminal songs, and you go, "Well, that's Dave singing." No, it's Rick. Mm. It's Rick and Dave. The sound of the two of them. And
you take away the keyboards, it's going to sound like a demo, more or less.
You're right.
Essentially. Tell me about Mr. Holland's.
Mr. Holland's Opus Foundation
that you're involved with. Because this is really important with all the cutbacks that are going on.
This is more than important, all right? This is essential.
It's vital.
It's vital it's vital to our health as a nation. It's vital to our future as grown-ups right now. We're building a generation of people who have forgotten how to dream, excuse me, who haven't learned how to work together properly, who haven't been able to take abstract concepts and turn them into physical realities and stuff. These are the things that we used to learn in school through doing the arts.
Right.
And that when we had music class in school, what did we learn in music class? We learned how to take these little black dots and turn them into an actual thing of beauty. We learn how to own our own part, but at the same time be responsible to our teammates and be on the stick, but also try to express ourselves. You just learn so many things as a human being. It's not about turning out the next, pick the virtuoso,
right.
Steve Vai. It's actually about turning out better people. People who have imagination, who have empathy, who understand how to do something that goes from a concept to a reality. They understand how if you work at it, it gets better. Those are the people that I want to take care of me when I'm too old to take care of myself.
Right.
I don't want a bunch of people who only know how to do this and can't interact.
Amen and amen.
Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
So, when we cut this as being non-essential, to me, it's like cutting off a piece of our body and saying it's non-essential. Music is an essential part of culture. Nobody knows that better than you and the people who are watching this right now. We all love music. And if we care about that part of our culture, then we have to support it in our schools. So the Mr. Holland's Opus Foundation is dedicated to putting instruments in schools because they've cut the budgets, and many schools they have a music program and they can't afford to teach it because they don't have the instruments.
Where do they find out more about that?
It's www.mhopus, M-H-O-P-U-S, MrHollandsOpus.com. And, we're doing really good work, and particularly now, since we've had these hurricanes and tornadoes and other natural disasters, we need help because a lot of those schools got wiped out by natural disaster.
Well, we'll tell you here and on camera in front of everybody, whenever you need KLOS to help you with anything, we are there.
That's great.
Absolutely. So
Wonderful.
any projects. I can't thank this man enough for what he's done for all of us in radio by producing so many great records that make us sound good on the air. Like, oh, God, I love that, fill in the blank song that you played. And often I go back and go, that's one that Bob Ezrin produced. Or that was, that's from the Destroyer album. That's from $1 Billion Babies. That's it just goes on and on and on. So thank you, sir, for all the great music over the years.
Thank you, guys.
And keep it coming. And I hope to hear more from the Purple Band. Thank you for giving us Deep Purple back.
Well, I'll tell you what, and for Purple fans out there, this album is tearing it up in Europe, and it's tearing it up overseas, and in America, nobody even knows it's out there. So tell your friends to tell their friends. We need to show these guys the support that they deserve. They're one of the most important. You know that they're the second longest running band in rock history.
Are they really?
Yep. Rolling Stones are number 1. Deep Purple is number 2.
Fantastic. Bob Ezrin, thank you so much for stopping by 95.5 KLOS.
Thank you.